You may have been developing in Gradle for a while, and now you want to use a Maven repository. But you want to populate that Maven repository with what you've already cached in Gradle. Gradle will put your dependencies, your jars and your poms and any other dependencies in your .gradle directory. It's not API how the jars and poms are stored, but it's pretty easy to figure out. It's not that hard. So we're going to copy the jars and the poms out of your home.gradle directory into a Maven file-based directory. Let's make a project to do this. This is going to be an application. The implementation language will be Groovy. I'm going to choose Groovy because of the XML. Only one application project. Build script DSL is Groovy. That's fine for project name. Package name. We'll be using this template, but let's clean it up a little bit. Right now, we're not going to have tests. The user will specify where the Maven file-based repo is as the first and only argument to the script. The Maven file-based repo will have a decent bit of logic all by itself, so right away we're going to make a class for that, which will take the root to the Maven file-based repo. Alt-enter, create class Maven file repo. So we're going to get the poms and the jars out of the user's home directory .gradle, and we're going to copy them into this Maven file-based repo. We're also going to make a class right off the bat for the Gradle user dir. So again, this is the .gradle directory within the user's home directory. This will require no arguments because we know where it is. We can look up the user's home environment variable, and then we can tack on the .gradle directory. So the general idea is we're going to search the Gradle user dir, which is home.gradle. We're going to search the poms in that. Poms are XML. We're going to inspect each pom for the group, artifact, and version. And then we're going to copy that into the Maven file-based repo at the appropriate location. So in a Maven file-based repo, the directory structure is pretty simple. Underneath the root, you'll have the group ID, and then the artifact ID or the name, and then the version. That's where the poms and the jar files or the artifacts go. So we're going to search this, the Gradle user dir, for the poms, inspect the poms, and copy the poms in and use the poms to find the jar files. So the first thing we're going to need to do is find the poms out of the Gradle user dir. We need a method here for the poms. We'll make it return a set of poms. And we'll make the class for pom. Pom will be a wrapper around a Pom file. So we're going to have things like the group ID, artifact ID, version, packaging. Packaging is like usually jar, but it could be pom, it could be zip. A pom will be constructed from a file on the disk, an XML file. We'll parse this XML. And now populate the fields, the properties. And this is the nice thing about Groovy, is that I can dot into these XML elements to get the values that I want to populate here in the properties. Do the same thing for artifact ID, version, and packaging. Now POMs can have parent POMs, in which case they can get the group ID, the artifact ID, and the version from the parent POM. So we need to check actually if these values are empty. If they are empty, then we'll get the value from the parent. So we need to check, is this empty? If this is not empty, then we'll get the value from here. But if it is empty, we need to get it from the parent. Change that to ternary doc.parent.groupid.text. And we'll do the same thing for artifact ID and version. Packaging is a little bit more complex because I think you can get the packaging from the parent POM, and if it's not specified in the POM or the parent POM, then its default is jar. So we need two ternary operators. Then we'll have another embedded ternary. So what this says is we prefer to get the packaging from the POM packaging element, but if that is empty, then we'll look to the parent element. So in the XML document, the parent element, then the packaging element. If that's not empty, we'll use that value, and then finally we'll fall back to jar. And while we're here, we're going to keep track of the file that it came from. So we need a field for this. So we're going to iterate over each of these. Instead of using the it implicit variable, I'm going to use Pom File. So we'll make a new POM, POM P, new Pom File. Use string interpolation here. Now we'll need a toString on POM so that we can print it here. Let's make a toString. Alright, so what do we want to see when we print out the POM file? Well, we want to see the group ID, colon, the artifact ID, colon, the version, colon, the packaging. These are basically how we specify the coordinates in Gradle. So once we have this POM file, we want to copy it into the Maven file repository. So we're going to say Maven file repo.copyin. This will be a new method, and we're going to copy in the POM. Now this is why I needed the file on the POM, because we're going to copy it in at the file level, at the file system level. So we're going to need to make this method copy in. Now the first thing we're going to need to know is where to put it, what directory to put the POM file in. And we're going to need that for POMs, and we're going to need that for jar files or in general artifacts. So let's write a method to find that for a given POM file. Therefore, POM. We don't need this accessible outside of the Maven file repo, so let's make it private. By default, it would be public. The POM has the group ID, the artifact ID, and the version. And The most typical case is that we have all three. So we're going to put it in the group ID, artifact ID, version for the directory structure. Each one of those will get an element in the directory. So if all three of them are present, the group ID, artifact ID, and version, then that will be the most typical case, and we'll make a directory for that. I want to use Apache Commons lang here, so I'm going to say if string utils, which you can see is not on my class path. So let's add that to the class path. Go to the project. Up here at the top, let's make a directory called build source. Alt insert directory build source. Now in this build source directory, we'll need a build.gradle because we're actually the Apache Commons lang dependency will not go in build source, it will go in the build.gradle. Under dependencies, we'll have another entry here for Commons lang. So let's go get that. MVN repository, this is where I get all of my coordinates, Gradle coordinates, Maven coordinates, Commons lang. Take the newest, Gradle, copy to clipboard, paste it here, refresh the Gradle project, recent files, Maven file repo. If string utils, now we have it on the class path. Is not blank, this is why I brought it in, is not blank. So we want to use pom.groupID. And same thing, except for the version or the artifact and the version. So if all three of these are present, then our directory structure will be the root to the Maven file-based repo, then an element for the group ID, the artifact ID, and the version. Oh, this is going to return a file. Use paths.get the root dir absolute path. So I did not set this as a field in the constructor. I need to do that. So then we'll use pom.groupID, pom.artifact ID, pom.version.to file. I think we have to import this. Now the next case would be that the group ID and the artifact ID are specified but not the version. And then we would put it in almost the same thing except for the group ID and artifact ID. We'll leave off version. So you can copy this, take off pom.version, and then finally the group ID may be specified but neither the artifact ID nor the version, and this would most likely be for a parent POM. It's interesting here to point out that Groovy will not complain that I don't have a return statement for all paths in the code. If this were Java, I would have a compile error here that I'm not returning the file. I'm not returning a file in all cases, but Groovy lets it. All right, so when we are copying in a Pom file, we have to make sure that the directory exists. So I'll say make dirs, and then we'll use standard Java to copy. Files.copy. Source will be pom.file to path. The destination will be the directory that we just made and the file name of the POM. So again, we'll use paths.get. Again, dir for POM. We have to use absolute path here because paths.get wants strings, and we use the Pom file name, pom.file.name. In case the file already exists, we'll overwrite it. Okay, that's how we copy in a Pom file. Now let's get the jar file that corresponds to this Pom file. In Maven, you would find the jar file adjacent to the Pom file. In Gradle's userdir, in Gradle's cachedir, they aren't always right adjacent to the Pom file. So that's why we need this method to find the jar file for a given Pom file. We're going to ask the Gradle userdir for the jar from the Pom. All right, now would be a good time to fill in the constructor. So Gradle userdir, constructor. We don't need any arguments. We know that it's the root directory is the user's home directory, then .gradle. So let's do that. Say rootdir equals new file system getenv home.gradle. We'll make a field for rootdir. We're going to keep a set of files on the rootdir. This will be the Pom files and the artifact files, or the jar files. So we're going to say files equals new empty set. That'll be a set of files, and then we'll populate those files. So again, this is another reason to use Groovy. Rootdir.each file recurse. We'll use files of type just files. We don't care about directories. And in the closure, we'll say files.add it. Guess now would be a good time to fill in the method for Poms. So if we want a Pom, or if we want to filter down to just the Poms, say files.findAll. We'll use a closure. And we'll delegate this to the Pom class. Pom.isPom it. Obviously, not all of the files underneath the user's home.gradle directory are going to be Pom files, so we'll delegate the logic of whether a particular file is a Pom to the Pom class. Make this. So return Boolean. We'll make this return a file. Now, jar for Pom file, we'll do the same kind of thing. Return files.find. This time, we only expect to find one jar file for a given Pom. So we'll use the find method, and we'll say that the jar's name must be the Pom object's jar name, and we'll have to make this method. The Pom will know what the jar name would be. This will return a string. Basically, the jar name is going to be the same file name as the Pom, only instead of .pom.jar. And this is another reason that I brought in string utils from Apache Commons Lang. We're going to take the left of file.name, we'll say file.name.length -4. Put a little inline comment here that -4 is not just a magic value, it corresponds to .pom. And then we'll tack on .jar. Looks like I misspelled this. Equals. Go back to our app. Now it's possible that we will not find a jar for a given Pom. That would be, for instance, in the case of a parent Pom. So if jar equals null, then we'll just say this is a Pom only. If we found the jar, then we can copy it in. So we'll say print line copying $pom $p, and we'll ask the Maven file repo to copy in the jar, and we'll give it the Pom. We need a new method for this. So it'll be an overload on copy in, but it will take a file artifact and a pom. We still need to make the directory for the Pom file, find the directory for the Pom, find the directory for the Pom and make it if necessary, but then we'll need to copy in the artifact, not the Pom. So instead of the Pom, use the artifact. That's the source. And the artifact name. Let's fill in the isPom method. Control M, Pom. So for a given file, is this a Pom file? Well, it has to end in .pom. File name ends with .pom. And within the file, which we expect to be XML, the text has to include XML. Another reason to use Groovy, because it makes this really easy. This reads the whole text file. All right, let's clear out this Maven repo. This is the Maven File-based repo. And we'll set up a run configuration for this. Okay, just as we expected, index out of bounds, because I didn't give it an argument yet. The argument will be home tjm maven.repo. Okay, try again. Okay, had the parentheses in the wrong place. Try again. Well, I expected to see some output here, so what's going on? Oh, we never filled in the Pom is Pom. All right, let's see how far we get. Let's make sure that we get all the files from the Gradle user dir. F8 to step over. F8, Gradle user dir. Oh, maybe I didn't do each file recurse. Check if I did each file recurse. No. Okay, each file recurse. So that is a problem. All right, see if we get lucky here. Do the whole thing again. This looks encouraging. Let's see what our Maven file-based repo looks like. Okay, at the top level, we have the group ID, artifact ID, version, and then we have Poms and jars. Here is group, artifact, and there's a parent Pom. Group, artifact, version, jar, and Pom. Looks correct to me. So why would we do this? Why would we copy the files out of our .gradle into a Maven file-based repository? Well, I've done this in situations where we build in one environment and then we take our development environment to another environment that doesn't have all the same access to, let's say, Maven Central. So we would develop where we have connectivity, and then maybe take that project and take that Maven File-based repo to another system that doesn't have access to Maven Central and point it at the Maven File-based repo.